In 1951, a scientist at a Canadian university paid college students $20 a day to do absolutely nothing. No talking, no reading, no sound except a low hum, no sight except blank white goggles. Just lie on a bed in a small room and wait. Most of them couldn't last 2 days, not because of pain, not because of hunger, because their own minds turned against them. That experiment was supposed to be about boredom. It ended up revealing one of the darkest truths about the human brain. Total isolation doesn't just feel bad. It can be more damaging than actual physical torture. And today, on any given day, tens of thousands of people are living inside that exact experiment for years at a time. This is the story of what happens to a mind left completely alone, and why the man who discovered it never meant to. The scientist was Donald Hebb, head of psychology at McGill University. It was the height of the Cold War, and the CIA had a problem. They'd heard reports that Soviet and Chinese interrogators could make prisoners confess to almost anything, seemingly without laying a hand on them. Nobody in the West understood how. So the Canadian Defense Research Board, quietly backed by American intelligence, funded Hebb to find out. The project had an innocent-sounding name, Sensory Deprivation Research, and an official cover story about studying boredom on long watches and space flights. The setup was simple. Volunteers lay on a cot in a small, soundproof room. Cardboard cuffs on their arms removed the sense of touch. Goggles let in only diffuse light. No shapes, no edges. Headphones played a constant, meaningless hum. There was nothing to fight, nothing to endure, just silence and their own mind. Hebb expected the students to get bored, maybe restless. Some would earn a nice paycheck for a quiet weekend. Instead, within hours, subjects' thoughts started drifting and fragmenting. They couldn't hold a train of thought. By day 2, many were hallucinating, vividly. One man saw a procession of squirrels marching in formation. Another felt his head had detached from his body. One reported having 2 bodies at once. Almost nobody made it past 48 hours. Here's the part that surprised everyone, including Hebb. The brain doesn't just tolerate emptiness. It needs a constant stream of outside information to function correctly. Take away sight, sound, and touch, and the brain doesn't simply idle. It starts manufacturing input on its own, which is a clinical way of saying it starts hallucinating. Decades later, neuroscientists would explain why. 2 brain regions in particular depend on outside stimulation to stay properly active. The prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning, decision-making, and impulse control, and the hippocampus, which builds and organizes memory. Starve them of stimulation and their activity drops. Reasoning gets foggy, memories blur. Time itself becomes hard to track. This wasn't a flaw in a few unlucky volunteers. It was a design feature of the human mind, turning into a liability. We are built to expect a world. Take the world away, and the brain fills the silence with something worse. Hebb's study stayed a Cold War curiosity for 30 years. Then, in 1982, a psychiatrist named Stuart Grassian walked into Walpole State Penitentiary in Massachusetts to interview men held in what prisons call the hole. He wasn't expecting to find Hebb's laboratory recreated by accident, at scale, for years at a time, on real human beings. Of the 15 prisoners he examined in long-term solitary, 14 showed the same eerie cluster of symptoms: extreme hypersensitivity to ordinary sound and light, spiraling panic, an inability to concentrate or even complete a sentence, paranoid thoughts, and in the worst cases, hallucinations indistinguishable from psychosis. He gave it a name, Shoe syndrome, after the special housing units where it was born. Men who had no prior history of mental illness were developing symptoms that looked clinically like schizophrenia. And the symptoms started fading only after they were removed from isolation. The volunteers in Hebb's chamber could press a buzzer and walk out after 2 days. The men Grassian interviewed had been living inside that chamber for months, some for years. This is where the story stops being abstract. Prisoners of war held in solitary confinement, figures like Vietnam-era POWs, have described isolation, not beatings, as the hardest part of captivity to survive. Not because it was the most violent thing done to them, because it was the most disorienting. Without another mind to check against, some describe losing track of what was real. Modern case files echo the same thing. People held in isolation for extended periods report time distorting, hours feeling like days, days blurring into an indistinguishable fog. Many develop obsessive, repetitive behaviors just to give their minds something to hold on to. Pacing a fixed number of steps, recounting the same memory over and over, talking to themselves just to hear a voice. The brain, denied a world to interpret, starts inventing one. And once it starts, it doesn't always know how to stop, even after the door opens again. Grassian's research became key evidence in lawsuits and prison reform fights across the United States. In 2015, the United Nations updated its standards for the treatment of prisoners, the Mandela Rules, and drew a hard line. Solitary confinement beyond 15 consecutive days, it stated, should be considered a form of torture. 15 days. Roughly 7 times longer than Hebb's volunteers could endure by choice, with a buzzer in hand and the certainty it would end. And yet, in prisons around the world, isolation lasting months or years is still routine. The uncomfortable truth Hebb stumbled into in 1951 still holds. The human mind isn't built to survive alone with itself. We think of connection, to people, to sound, to a world outside our own skull, as a comfort. It isn't a comfort. It's structural. Remove it, and the architecture of the mind itself starts to give way. Hebb set out to study boredom. What he actually found was one of the load-bearing walls of human sanity, and how quickly it collapses once you take away the one thing none of us think we need: each other. The next time silence feels peaceful, remember, for the human brain, there's a line where peaceful silence quietly turns into something else entirely.